my name's Jeremy Broun and I've been woodworking for centuries, spanning centuries. Now here's a project that might interest you. Ladders, if you buy them, are not at all cheap, and for a fraction of the price you can buy the wood to build what is a very satisfying and useful item. A custom built ladder using really basic woodworking techniques, perhaps just hand tools or a combination of hand and power tools, not least my favourite tool, the router. The great thing about a ladder from a woodworking point of view is it involves repeat repetition, so it's a very good exercise in constructional or woodworking methodology. For instance, one of the things I didn't use was a tape measure, other than for measuring up other ladders to check the rung height and the width of the ladder. Now I had to build this ladder quite quickly for a specific loft access 9 foot high or 9 foot up, and in fact, including filming, which slows the process down enormously, I had it designed and made in a short working day. I used off-the-shelf standard pine sections already radiused from my local DIY superstore, and from a prior visit I calculated I needed about 4 2.4 metre lengths. I was in fact short by a metre or so, and fortunately had some spare stock. So cost-wise, this ladder cost me well under £20. Now there are two main things to emphasise. What I'm offering in this video is a construction strategy for you to design your own ladder. And secondly, which is really paramount, make your ladder more than sturdy enough for the weight of the person likely to use it. Mine is calculated according to a weight of under 15 stone, and importantly the angle it is likely to be used at is quite steep, which affects the construction. I can tell you I've had a few hairy experiences falling off motorbikes and ladders, and one of them when I renovated my previous property. A rung broke on the old ladder I was using and I somersaulted backwards, crashing down a half landing and miraculously onto my feet with the handles of a coffee cup still in my hand. The cup itself had broken. Now the key to strength is the timber section and the need to use as not free timber as possible. So you will need to select each piece carefully, looking for twists, bows and knots. You don't want a big knot running through the rung intersection. And that leads me on to the next most important consideration, which is the support of the rungs. Simply using butt joints and massive screws is risky in my opinion, because when you drill down the end grain you are in effect weakening the section considerably. The strength of a joint is all about overlapping fibres. Well, I wanted to make this ladder quickly, so I decided on a shallow housing that could easily be cut, and quickly too. Before I get on to that, let's look at how I measured the lengths, and also I had to consider portability. So this is why my ladder looks a little odd and is in two sections. So again, you can make just a single run, but I was limited by standard 2.4 metre lengths and needing a longer reach than that. And also longer pieces of wood just wouldn't fit into my car. So moving on to the construction, I first cut the lengths of the ladder components, and for this I dusted the cobwebs off a great little radial arm saw I was given back in 1989. That's when I wrote the book Electric Woodwork. It's a bit noisy, but it's a great little tool, very underexploited in the UK. You can of course use a hand saw or even a fairly sturdy jigsaw. Now in order to cut the rungs, I made a simple stop clamped on, and this considerably speeds up the process. For my ladder there are two sections, so I actually built them separately. The main part first and then fitted the top section to it. As I said earlier, I did not need to use a ruler other than to make up a spacer and use it in conjunction with a section of the rung. So the next thing is to mark out and cut the rung notches or housings. Now once the markings are completed on one length, you simply transfer them onto the other. And make sure you always shade the waist portion. Now the cutting of the notches is a good example of methodology, because in my ladder there are 18 of them. I always aim for a tight joint, so great care is taken cutting the outer lines. Removing the waist I'm showing here in a variety of ways, but as I've been cutting this type of joint for nearly 4 decades, I reckon the quickest is to make narrow cuts in the waist portion, then knock them out and trim to the baseline with either the radial arm saw, but which I find to be quicker is with the router freehand. Yes, freehand. Don't be afraid of freehand routing. You just avoid hitting the walls of the joint. Now I would be pretending to say with all my experience that gluing up is simple. It isn't. It's a nightmare. Even when your construction is accurate and all the joints, well, most of them, are really tight. You must do a dry run first. I chose a slow setting glue as I knew this would take at least 10 minutes to glue and clamp. You see, wood is always fighting, and the slightest bow or twist just makes the assembly of a simple thing like a ladder quite tricky. So I used sash clamps to help. I then made the top section of the ladder. You can lock the rungs in by skew nailing or using long screws, and it's a good idea not to just rely on the predominantly end grain gluing. I finally screwed the two ladder sections together. Oh yes, and I did have a bit of a hiccup with the ladder gluing up slightly out of square. You know, there's almost a case for deliberately making the joints loose so that you can use something like an epoxy glue thickened up with a filler to take up the slack. That would make the gluing up an awful lot easier. You see, even I can get trapped in the mindset of a narrow woodworking genre such as fine furniture making when it really is a case of horses for courses. I learned a lot from helping build a replica schooner in Australia a few years ago. The tolerances in boat building are much greater, but the strength, of course, is paramount. So, as I say, even a simple project like this has its tricky moments. There are, of course, lots of different ladder constructions to consider. In another video I make a roof ladder using just batten sections and screws. I'd really like to design a ladder that folds up as though it's one plank, and I'd probably use metal for the rungs. But at any rate, please keep posted and subscribe, and have fun and keep safe.